Now we're going to move right along to someone who has been playing Old Home Week here today. Paulette Masse is familiar to many of you in Fall River. She's been a leader in dementia and Alzheimer's disease for over 30 years. Most of us know her as the founder of a geriatric care management company, but more so as one of the co-founders of the first caregiver support group for Alzheimer's, as an Alzheimer's adult day health center founder, and she does a lot of specific work in Alzheimer's and dementia. We want to have her come up and talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and the warning signs and symbols.
Thank you, Nancy. Has everyone had their coffee?
Yes.
Okay, good. My job today is to talk to you about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, because these words are generally used interchangeably, but you really need to understand that there's a difference. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Alzheimer's is a terminal neurological disease. When people talk about dementia, they assume that a person has Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's itself is a disease. The word dementia is used as an umbrella term to describe the symptoms that someone with Alzheimer's might have. It isn't a disease in of itself. It just means that a person is exhibiting symptoms. And it's important to understand that there's a difference, because if it isn't Alzheimer's, it could be something that might be treatable. It could be something as simple as a clinical depression, because a person who's clinically depressed can exhibit the exact same symptoms as a person with Alzheimer's disease. They become withdrawn, they become confused, they become generally isolated, and if that person doesn't have a lot of community connections and isn't visible out in the community where people would notice that difference, someone might say, well, you know, she's 80, she's got Alzheimer's disease. It's really, really important to get a thorough diagnosis so that the treatment can be appropriate. And if it also is Alzheimer's disease, there are some medications out there that are not going to cure it, but in most cases can be helpful. So when we're talking about Alzheimer's, again, we're talking about a disease that is terminal. And it isn't much different than a cancer that is terminal. And people don't understand that it's progressive. A person in early Alzheimer's might start to exhibit the symptoms of memory loss. Has anyone in this room ever misplaced their keys? Yeah, okay. How many times a day do you misplace your keys? A person with Alzheimer's might pick up a key and then not know what to do with it. Okay? They'll look for it, they'll find it, and then they won't know what to do with it. A person with Alzheimer's disease will forget appointments, because we don't do that kind of stuff, right? Okay. The difference is that when we do that kind of stuff, we kind of blow it off because we've got so much on our mind that it's kind of normal. You kind of expect that stuff because you're thinking about 100 other things and you're just not focused on what you're doing. But a person with Alzheimer's disease, again, will reach the point where their memory loss will begin to affect their daily living. All right? But memory loss is generally the first symptom that you'll see in Alzheimer's disease. Another symptom that's very common in early Alzheimer's is being able to plan and problem solving. Even in early Alzheimer's, some people should not be driving. Not all people in early Alzheimer's have to give up driving, but for some people, their inability to do what we call mapping can get them in trouble. These are the people who get lost. These are the people who might walk into a store and say, I'm looking for my mother. Okay? And they don't know how to get around that. They don't know what else to do. Their difficulty to get home if they're driving. I've had so many families say, he's okay driving because he drives from our house, he goes to Stop and Shop, he goes to Dunkin' Donuts, and he comes home, and that's his daily routine. So it's a half mile. It's not a big deal. And he can manage the car, so that's not a problem. The problem, however, is that should he come into a detour, he could end up in Chicago because he doesn't know how to get back. And mapping is a problem. At some point in the disease, this will be a severe problem because for somebody who goes for a walk and doesn't recognize the area that they're in because everything has changed, and in Fall River, that's pretty easy. We all get lost these days. But if someone goes for a walk and isn't familiar with the area, they may become frightened. And if they become frightened, a person with Alzheimer's is not likely to ask for directions, especially if they're in an area where there aren't a lot of people around. So what happens is they become frightened, and when a person with Alzheimer's becomes frightened, they tend to hide, which makes finding them significantly more difficult than it would to find somebody who is lost, which is why the outcome is not always a very good one when an Alzheimer's person wanders. Wandering is one of the most dangerous behaviors that a person with Alzheimer's has. And 6 out of 10 people with Alzheimer's will wander. So that's something you need to be aware of. If someone walks into your establishment, whether it's a bank or whatever, and they're looking confused, maybe it would be a good idea to say, can I help you? Is there someplace you're going? And it may require that, after you talk with them for a while, that you take a look at the license and find out where they're supposed to be and help them get home. Okay? Another thing is completing familiar tasks at home. A person who's made coffee every morning for the last 40 years with Alzheimer's might walk into the kitchen, get the coffee pot, put the water in, do what they're supposed to do, and then walk away from it. I was doing an assessment in one home, and the lady was lovely, and she was appropriate, she was socially appropriate, and I asked if I could have a drink of water, and she said, sure. She said, I've got some in the refrigerator. She walked into the kitchen, she walked to the cupboard, she got a glass, she put it on the counter, and she walked back and sat with me. She wasn't able to complete that task. Okay? Confusion to time and place. That's kind of self-explanatory. Trouble understanding visual images. See, the problem with Alzheimer's is that very often people think that their vision is a problem because their perception is changing. Their brain is changing and their perception is changing. And a person with Alzheimer's, well, this floor is pretty okay. But if the kitchen floor is one color and the cushions on the chairs are the same color, a person with Alzheimer's is just as likely to sit on the floor as they are to sit on the chair. And it has nothing to do with their vision. It has to do with their brain messing everything up and telling them that that's the chair. They can't differentiate. So there are some really good tricks that we can use to try to keep people safe. And it's a matter of learning these things. And education is key, I think, to the community. But in understanding the disease, it isn't so much vision as it is perception. So if you hand an Alzheimer's person something, they may reach for it over here, but it has nothing to do with what their eyes are seeing. It has to do with how their brain interprets it. So keep that in mind. With regard to, I just want to make sure I get my symptoms all done here. All right. So those are the primary symptoms that I have. But there are stages of Alzheimer's that people talk about. And lots of times people will ask me, what stage is my mother in? Well, that's not an easy answer, because the thing with Alzheimer's is that it's kind of fluid. And I'll have families say, you know, I don't think my mother has Alzheimer's. The doctor said she had Alzheimer's, but she cooked dinner the other day and she did this and it was wonderful, and she got a call from her cousin that she hasn't seen in years, and they had a great conversation, and everything sounds good today. Tomorrow, not so much. But those days of clarity are really confusing to families. So there may be someone who comes into your establishment one day and says, oh, I think I'll have this. This isn't something I usually have. I want this. And there'll be other days when someone may have to order for them because they can't make sense of the menu. Okay? In the very early stage of the disease, which generally lasts 2 to 4 years, you're finding that a person is less active. They become more isolated. And part of the reason for that is that they have an awareness that something is wrong. They have an awareness that if something is wrong and you find out about it, then they're going to lose control of their lives. They become, again, the best word for it is frightened. And that can be, they can exhibit that in a lot of different ways. They can become angry. They can be isolated. They can be shying away from family. At this point in time, as the first stage progresses, an adult day program or a social day program may be exactly what they need. The reality, however, is that they're going to fight it tooth and nail, because they are afraid that people will have expectations of them that they can't meet. I'm going into a strange situation with people I don't know, and they do all kinds of things, and they talk about all kinds of things, and by this point, people are having some difficulty with their language. So I'm just going to sit there and not talk all day, and they're going to want me to do these things, and I'll be embarrassed. I don't want to put myself in that situation. The truth of the matter is that once they are engaged in a setting like that, a social setting, they generally do significantly better because of the socialization, because of the stimulation. And you know, anyone who has had the experience of getting someone into a program will tell you that they found the person has improved for a while. And that's a good thing. The other thing is that people who are engaged in such programs are able to stay in the community longer than somebody who's isolated at home. And I've had families say she's content sitting in front of the television all day. The problem is she's not getting stimulated, she's not getting socialized, and her disease process is going to be more rapid than someone who is out and about. When we talk about stages, it depends on who you read. The Alzheimer's Association typically uses 3 stages: early, middle, and late. The middle, the moderate stage, is where people will have increased difficulty with speech. You know, that thing that holds, that you have coffee in, could I have one of those? Okay. They'll start, thank you. They'll start using their language the best they can, and sometimes they'll describe what they want, but they can't come up with the word. They will sometimes start a conversation, and end up on a totally different track, and sometimes it's hard to keep up. We have people who repeat, what time is it? And if you've lived with someone or know someone who's been there, it's exhausting. And they're asking not because they want to be difficult. They're asking because they don't remember. What happens with Alzheimer's disease is, if you can think of a filing cabinet that's full, and I've got a couple of those at home, and you're trying to add another folder, and there's no place for that information to go, that's what happens with Alzheimer's. So if you say, what time is it? And I tell you that it is almost 9:45, and in 5 minutes say, what time is it? And I say, it's 9:45. After I've said that 10 or 15 times, I'm exhausted. So you need to understand that when people come in and they ask those kinds of questions or say those kinds of things, it's because they don't remember. There's no place to put it. That new information doesn't have any place to go. So this is also the point at which people will wander, okay? And they often wander for reasons. I mean, sometimes it's aimlessly. I tend to wander aimlessly in stores, but when a person with Alzheimer's wanders, it's because they truly don't know where they are. People wander at home looking for the bathroom. People wander in the community looking for their home, which was probably knocked down 30 years ago. People wander for a lot of reasons, and that's very, very important. Finally, the third stage is when a person is totally dependent on someone else. They've lost their ability to speak. They've lost their ability to move independently. They've lost their ability to swallow, which is generally and very often the cause of death. A person will aspirate and get pneumonia, and that will be the end stage, the very end stage of the disease. That's why this is a terminal illness. It makes a person susceptible to the kinds of things that people without Alzheimer's die from. Okay. The thing you've got to remember is that dementia is a word that can describe symptoms and a lot of causes. You need to know the difference because you need to find the appropriate treatment. I am so excited about the possibility or the probability of this going forward because there are so many people out there who will benefit from a community that understands that people with Alzheimer's need the support of the community to stay in the community where they and their families want them to be. So I thank you all, myself, for your interest in coming today, and I really hope that you'll help out in going forward with this project. And thank you.